Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be recapping Rainbow Six Siege's European League week number 1 of stage number 2 for 2023. Just as a very quick primer for the league, the 10 teams are split into two groups. Group A is Wild, Virtus Pro, Secret, Into the Breach, and Koi, and Group B is G2, Wolves, Eminem, Heroic, and BDS. Week 1 had 2 playdays, each with 4 matches, and so we'll start with the first one. Eminem versus Heroic. They played on Skyscraper and it was a 7-4 victory in favor of Eminem. Coming into the stage, Heroic didn't look too great, especially considering how tough their group was, but in this game and the other game, as you'll see, they kept it fairly close even though they weren't able to get a win, and Eminem came out of the gates pretty hot. Surprisingly, we saw 2 Skyscrapers to kick things off, and well, we'll talk about the map stats at the very end, but it's been very defender-sided, as you'd expect. In this match, Uses in particular popped off, going 13-6 with a 1.5 rating. Next up is Team Secret versus Into the Breach, also on Skyscraper, also a 7-4, this time in favor of Secret. Into the Breach took TT9's place in the league, retaining 3 of their players, picking up 2 new ones. Last stage, TT9 and Team Secret were decidedly 2 of the worst teams in the league. And although these are both fairly different rosters, people still didn't have the highest evaluation of either of them coming into the stage relative to the other teams in the league. And we'll definitely have to see both of them play a bit more, but they both look quite a bit better than they were before. Miracle and Groovy were the 2 standouts on Secret, going 31 and 10 combined on kills and deaths. And for Into the Breach, Kanto was the only real standout player, going 15 and 9 with a 4-0 entry scoreline. And he also scored the first ace of the stage. Third game of the day was G2 versus BDS, and this looked to be the game of the day. And it started looking like it was probably going to be a blowout, but it did end up being fairly close with a 7-5 scoreline in favor of G2. The match was on Oregon, and it was very defender-sided, as you can expect from Oregon at this point. 9 of the 12 rounds went to the defenders. G2 actually wins the first 5 rounds in a row, and then BDS wins a single one in that half. They flip sides, BDS loses that first round, so G2 is then up 6-1. BDS then win the next 4, score 6-5 in favor of G2, and they managed to close it out in round 12, 7-5 scoreline, securing the full 3 points against BDS. Alamau and Virtue really popped off this match, 17-8 for Alamau, 14-5 for Virtue, and 10 of Alamau's 17 kills came in the first 3 rounds of the game. And the final playday of the day was actually the first 7-0 of the stage, Wild taking down Koi on Chalet. And this continues Wild's flawless group stage performance for the year. They went 4-0 last group stage, they're now 1-0 this group stage. And this was just a crushing through and through. Almost every player positive on Wild, no player positive on Koi. Wild scored a 6-1 entry scoreline, aces in Pack Bowl with 100% cost, and most notably Pack Bowl with 6 out of 6 possible plants. And to be totally fair, it probably wouldn't have been a 7-0 if Koi had started on the attack. Chalet is generally a very attacker-sided map. I'm sure Wild would have still dismantled them, but you have to imagine that Koi would have picked up at least a round or 2. Moving on to day number 2, we have the 5th match of the week, Wild versus Into the Breach. And a little bit of a surprise here, Into the Breach picks up the win 8-6. So Wild still walk away with a point, but their perfect group record for the year is shattered. The map was Bank, and just like all of the games we're going to see today, it was a 4-2 in the first half. Half of the games did go to overtime, so that means we saw 4-2, and then the other team got a 4-2 in the second half, pushing it to overtime, of course. And that is in sort of stark contrast to day number 1, where we didn't see any overtime. Aces and Jags were the standouts on Wild, Aces with 14-9, Jags with 11-9, but they were no match for Into the Breach's duo of Noah and Kanto, who went 15-9 and 14-10 respectively, with Kanto on a 4-2 entry scoreline. Next up is G2 versus Heroic. This one was quite close, going all 15 rounds, G2 taking it 8-7, and we did get to see one of the 2 new maps in Consulate in this match. So a couple of close games for Heroic, but all they have to show for it is the single point. On the other hand, while G2 also played a couple of close games, they won both of theirs, so they have 5 of the 6 possible points. And they actually end up being the only 2-0 team at the end of playday number 2. Another duo of incredible performers on G2, Virtue returning as one of the 2, but this time Doki with 23 kills tops the leaderboard. And really the only thing keeping Heroic in this match were their clutches. They had 4 1vx's compared to G2's single clutch. And I think G2 being otherwise dominant in this match is best illustrated by the entry scoreline. G2 were 11-4 on entry. And one funny thing to mention about this matchup is the number of players that they've sort of traded over the years. Uno used to play on G2, then he played on Heroic, now he's back on G2. Benji used to play on Heroic, now he's on G2. Kayak plays on Heroic, but used to play on G2, and Blaz almost got picked up by G2. The penultimate match of week number 1 was Virtus Pro versus Secret, a 7-4 scoreline just like Secret's match in day number 1, but this time they are on the losing end, i.e. Virtus Pro take the match 7-4 against Secret on bank. Although the entry scoreline leaned slightly in favor of Team Secret, the two standout players on Virtus Pro, Shepard and Pasha, were enough to get the job done. Shepard most notably going 9-6 on KD, 2-1 on entry with 100% cost, 45% survival rate, and all of this while being their hard support player. Finally, we have a 7-4 victory for Wolves over Eminem on Chalet. This means we started off with a couple of 7-4s and we end off with a couple of 7-4s. And funny enough, the two 7-4s in day number 1 were by Eminem and Secret, and in day number 2 they were against Eminem and Secret. It was pretty surprising that Wolves were willing to take Eminem to Chalet, and even more surprising that they were able to beat them on it. Eminem have played it so many times and lost it so few times that this felt like a pretty bold move from Wolves, but it did end up paying off for them. Uses went from being Eminem's pop-off player in day number 1 to having a pretty atrocious day number 2, going 3-9. And sort of uncharacteristically for Eminem, it was not one of their 3 main fraggers who topped their side of the leaderboard. Instead, it was Nafe who went 12-7 on KD and 3-1 on entry. But a couple of Wolves players showed up and really got the job done. Deadshot went 12-8 on KD, 4-1 on entry. And Shinka was the real standout, going 12-6 on KD, no entry engagements, but 82% cost, 2 1vx's, and 3 plants. Just like for Virtus Pro, it was their hard support player who popped off and managed to help them secure the full 3 points. And since there's only been 1 or 2 maps played for any given team, most of the players I'm about to mention will be players that I've already mentioned, but the highest rated player is Shinka on 1.74, pretty impressive, but that is only over the course of 1 map. That has a good chance of falling. Virtue has a 1.45 rating over 2 maps. Virtue is also plus 17 on KD over only 2 maps. Kanto is plus 6 on entry, really good. The next closest players are all on plus 3. The only player with perfect cost is Shepard, but he's only played the 1 map. Packbull has 86% cost after having played 2. Shinka and Astro have 2 clutches apiece. Packbull has 7 plants, and Shinka, Yonka, and Leader each have 3. As for map stats, we've seen 5 of the 9 possible maps. Bank, Chalet, and Skyscraper each have been played twice. Oregon and Consulate have each been played once. And I think, as you'd expect, Bank and Chalet have ended up being pretty attacker-sided. Skyscraper and Oregon have been very defender-sided. And I think a little bit unexpectedly, Consulate was very attacker-sided. This is a brand new map, and a lot of people were expecting it to be pretty defender-sided. Do keep in mind it's only been played the 1 time, so who knows, maybe that'll change up significantly in the future. But 10 of the 15 rounds played went to the attackers, and so it's not like one team just won a bunch of attacks and they won the map very decisively. It was a very close map, and the attackers won 2/3 of the rounds played. And so finally, let's take a look at the standings. Do keep in mind that in both of the groups, 3 of the teams have played twice and 2 of the teams have only played once. And each team will only be playing 4 times total in each group. So the teams that have played twice only have 2 more games to go. The teams that have played once have 3 more games to go. In case you're not looking at the screen, I'll read them down the line. Group A in order is Wild, Virtus Pro, Team Secret, Into the Breach, and Koi. And Group B is G2, Wolves, Eminem, Heroic, and BDS. Yes, Koi and BDS are the only teams without a single point, but they're also 2 of the teams that haven't played a second game yet. And as I mentioned earlier, G2 is the only team that has played twice and won both of their games. But Virtus Pro and Wolves are both also undefeated. They both just have only played a single game. And I guess that'll do it for the recap for this week. I'll keep it brief, just like the stage. Looking to the future, next week there are 2 more playdays, and then the following week there is a single more playday of groups, and then we go directly into the decider playoffs, which will pick up the very next day after groups conclude. But the semifinals and finals of said playoffs won't take place until the following week, so overall there are 4 weeks, I guess, of UL, 2.5 weeks of groups, and then 1.5 weeks of the playoff deciders, and then I guess beyond that there's also the LCQ, but that's not technically part of the actual stage. All right, I think that's going to do it for me. What did you guys think was the most exciting game of week number 1? I'd say the biggest contenders are probably either of the G2 games or either of the Wild games. The G2 games were both really close and had star performances from some of their players. Wild versus Koi was a 7-0 that had 6 plants by one of the teams. And finally, Wild versus Into the Breach. This is Wild's first group stage loss of the year and Into the Breach / TT9's first group stage win of the year. So let me know what you think down in the comments. A like and a subscription would also be very much appreciated. And with all of that being said, I will catch you guys next time.